Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. Tonight we have 6 stories in total. A little bit over 2 hours, I'm pretty sure. Anyways, I hope you all enjoy them. If you do, please be sure to drop a like rating. I'd really appreciate it. Let's see if we can reach 2 likes on this video. Subscribing if you are new is also very much appreciated, as I post content just like this all of the time. Sit back, do whatever it is that you do to relax, enjoy the stories, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. When you grow up on the internet grows up in you too. You can't escape it. Codes get in your head, binary whistles at the edge of your hearing. You see forum posts and raindrops on dead leaves. People drive to work and then back again. Every day the same thing, like they were long GIFs spiraling in and out of the frame. The web is inside all of us, spreading out in our neurons, mirroring the fiber optic cables spawning across the ocean floor. They say there are server farms in Utah, that when you see them from above they look like human silhouettes. They say that wasn't the way they were built. I keep thinking about this because of Orwell. I'm watching one of his videos now. He used to be my favorite YouTuber. I had watched him for over a decade back when he started as a dumb prank channel. I had that strange closeness with him, like we were friends even though only I knew him. A parasocial relationship, although that word makes me think of infections, of parasites, of something living inside a body that shouldn't be there. He uploaded the video I'm watching right now 2 days ago. There are almost 1 million views, 148 comments. He's updating his relationship status, which is, as it historically always has been for him, very complicated. I'm staring at his eyes as he talks. They're blue, ocean-colored, like they've always been. Nothing's changed. Everything is the same in the ocean, but every wave is new. I look on his Discord. No one is talking about this upload, or at least they aren't talking about what I'm looking for. I respond to some DMs while I'm reading comments. I used to just lurk, never post. That was my whole thing. Sharing too much info online weirded me out. The more you put out on the internet, the more it feels like you are making another version of yourself. There's IRL you, and then online you. Both can feel separate, distorted mirrors of each other. It was a few months ago, back when I still wasn't commenting, when I noticed people on the server using a running phrase, the hidden videos. I didn't know what it was, and no one ever elaborated. I assumed it was just an inside joke, but there was something off about it, a lingering weirdness. Then I started to see it in other places. Comments on YouTube videos, hashtags on the Hell site. Eventually, I started asking in the chat what it meant. No one ever responded, and Googling got me nowhere. Every site online that seemed to have any information was login restricted, which led me to revive my nearly dead social media accounts. That was when things changed. I guess I got so used to logging in and responding to messages, I started posting other stuff about me too. Small things at first, stuff like complaints about not finding things I was looking for, then links to articles I found interesting or depressing, talking about my day, pics of my dog. At some point I remember uploading a selfie, watching a little accumulation of hearts grow under the picture. The petite endorphin shot companies talk about that keep us posting, keep us on their platforms, keep us online. At this point I'd started to assume I would never find out what the hidden videos were. Everything was a dead end. I decided to write it off as another univalve internet mystery, like who buys the most glitter. Besides, I'd convinced myself this whole thing was a dumb joke, an elaborate troll no one talked about. I felt like I had spent 2 months asking what updog is while everyone tried not to laugh. Which is when I got the DM. It was just a link, nothing else. The kind of thing you'd guess was spam and delete, but it wasn't spam. The hyperlink test read, "Here are the hidden videos." I went to the person's profile who sent it, but there was nothing there. Completely blank, no comment history, No links in their bio. Their username was just a jumble of letters and numbers, and when I searched the combination, I got no hits in response. I messaged them, but they didn't respond. How long did I spend looking at the link? It felt like hours. The text glowing blue the way fires do in ghost stories when the devil is near. Then finally, I clicked it. There was barely any text on the site. I was so used to the overabundance of information on most sites, the staggering amount of empty space seemed almost sinister. No menu, no links to anything, no about button to click, just 6 embedded videos with dates under them, and the hidden videos written at the top of the page. The videos were Orwell posts, all from 3 years ago. 2 were from 2 separate days. The final 4 all from the same day. I bit my lip and leaned forward to study the images in the thumbnail. All stills of his face, but I didn't think I had ever seen any of them. My heart racing, I clicked play on the first video. It seemed totally normal, just him talking about his day. Uninteresting, kind of boring. Then he said, "Oh, one weird thing did happen." He went out late to the burrito place across the street from his apartment, the one he always went to. The main burrito guy, Adam, laughed when he saw him. "Back already, man?" Adam the burrito guy was a reoccurring character in Orwell's videos. He had a thick Massachusetts accent and frequently told Orwell stories about accidents in his workplace. Orwell said he asked Adam the burrito guy what he was talking about. Adam said, "Dude, you were here an hour ago." Orwell explained he'd just got there, and Adam said, "You have a twin. Do you want to watch the CCTV?" I told him that hell yeah, I want to watch the CCTV footage. Orwell said. He cracked his knuckles. I thought that would be baller, so we go in the back and he fires it up. I felt pretty cool, like I was on some surveillance show. We fast forwarded through some customers and then bang, there was the dude. Guys, he looked exactly like me, like clone level. Adam was helping somebody else, so we watched Jay make his burrito. Oh, and Jay, if you're watching this, Adam said you gave him too much guac. Just thought you should hear it from me, bro. Anyway, he gets his burrito and pays and then looks up at the camera. Like he was watching the camera. Watching us instead of watching him. Total weird stuff, but dude, if you see this or someone knows you, I want to meet up, alright? I would love to chill with you. Clone Club style. Okay, I'm out. Smash like and subscribe. Prescribe. Face reveal. He turned the camera off. That was the end. Frowning, I clicked on the next video. It was a few weeks later. He looked a little ragged, his hair messier than usual. After a long pause, he began to start talking, apologizing, saying he had tried to film the video twice, but it hadn't worked. "A few days ago, I posted a video about some guy who looks like me," he said. "But that video is gone, which, dude, I don't understand. I didn't delete it." He looks away from the camera, and when he looks back, he said, "I think someone is messing with me." Sadie and I were sort of back together. Went to the grocery store tonight and I saw him. The guy who looks like me. We were in the cereal aisle. Sadie's getting cereal, by the way. Not me. I'm still doing the all-toast breakfast challenge. Rise up, toast family. He set his arms up and made what seemed to be a bread symbol with outstretched hands. Then he lowered his arms and the enthusiasm vanished from his face, replaced by indecision and concern. But yeah, this dude, he was at the end of the aisle. No cart, nothing. Just standing there staring at me. And this is the weird thing. Sadie was looking at ingredients on some package, and when I said, "Hey, look at this," and she turned, he was gone. "She thinks I'm crazy, I think," he said and laughed. But he didn't look like he thought it was funny. I'm going to find that old video and re-upload it. If anybody knows that guy, tell him I want to hang, but I'm going to need him to be at least 15% less creepy. Maybe 20%. He turned off the camera. The next 3 videos were short, each under a minute. He was filming outside, taking footage of a crowd. You could hear him whispering, but it was unintelligible. I watched them each again, but I couldn't make anything out. Then I saw him at the far edge of a frame. Someone who looked exactly like Orwell, staring at the camera. The final video. I hesitated and then clicked. He seemed frantic, panicky. He was in his house, the living room where he always filmed, talking about how none of his videos were posting, how everyone thinks he's going crazy, but he's not. There was someone with his face following him, he said. He's seen him. He's filmed him. He didn't understand what was happening, but he needed help. Then he froze, his eyes wide. He was whispering, "No, no, no." And then he got up, his knee hitting his camera, sending it flying. The picture went sideways, upside down, tilted, and then stabilized, pointing to the couch where he had been filming. I could see an area of the room leading to the kitchen. I could see only the bottom edge of the room, his legs, his shoes. And then someone else walked into the frame. They stopped a few feet away from Orwell. The sound must have gotten screwed up when the camera fell because everything was a hard buzzing. It sounded like a swarm of wasps. Their shoes and legs, they were the same as Orwell. The video went black. As soon as it stopped, I watched it again and again and again. I can't tell you exactly how many times I hit play, over and over again for days straight, until suddenly the website didn't work. I kept hitting refresh, but my screen simply said Safari couldn't open the page because the server can't be found. Like it was never there, but it had been there. I went back to the message that had the link, but there was nothing in my chat history. The profile of the person who had sent me the message had been deleted. Everything empty, and all I had left was the image of Orwell, and whatever it was that looked like him in that room. I've been watching his videos since then, the ones dated after the last one. He looks normal, real, no sign of anything that isn't him. I've started to think all of this is a long con, some kind of ARG. There's no way any of it actually happened. But I keep seeing something in his eyes that wasn't there before. A strange gleam, the way they reflect. I'm watching other videos too. Ones where people mention secret videos in the comment sections. Those comments are all gone too, but I think I see the glow in those people's eyes too. An unreal shine. Yesterday I stopped at the gas station on the way home. Watched the stupid video on the screen at the pumps. Updated my status on a social media account. As I was leaving, a car pulled in next to me, pulling out into traffic. I glanced back in my rear view. There I was, stepping out of the other car, staring right back at me. I ran a successful true crime podcast called Eidolon. It covered missing person cases, from legendary stories on Amelia Earhart to relatively unknown cases from the recent news. Recently, I told my 100k plus followers that I was stepping away to focus on other projects, namely my day job as an audio engineer. I told my friends that I was taking a mental health break. All the interviews with grieving parents, friends, and lovers with no closure had chipped away at my soul. I needed to reset, rediscover the beauty in this world, to forget the darkness that lurks beneath its surface. But the main reason I shuttered Eidolon, the reason I deleted all my audio files and contact sheets, the reason I promised myself I would never touch the true crime genre again was due to one person, Charnel Sam. According to his scant Patreon profile, Sam was located somewhere in the US and had plenty of discretionary income, donating to various true crime podcasts via the site. But he gave the most money to mine, having donated over $5,000 to Eidolon for the past 2 years, usually through regular $200 payments. Charnel Sam was my biggest fan. My online conversations with Sam were brief and professional. I sent him a nice, personalized thank you message each time he donated, and would announce his username at the top of my credits after each episode. Most of the time, my messages went unanswered, but on occasion, he would respond with a single cryptic sentence. It was always the same. Light floods the grateful frame, catching moments gifted by time. I had no idea what that meant or what it had to do with my podcast. It might have been part of his online signature, perhaps some famous quote missing an attribution. But if that were the case, why only send the attribution and not an actual message? I never thought much about it. I was just happy to receive such large and consistent donations. If Charnel Sam wanted to send me a cryptic quote now and then, he was more than welcome to do it. But everything changed a few weeks ago when I received this. Hey Brian, I have some information that I think could help solve the Bertrand Hikers mystery. I'd recently re-aired an episode on the Bertrand Hikers, two teenage girls who mysteriously vanished while hiking in the Bertrand Nature Preserve in northwestern Georgia, an area not far from my home in the Atlanta suburbs. The case was one of my most popular stories, and the main one that launched my podcast. The disappearance of Heather Simmons and Alicia Gunderson is one of those local legends that everyone I grew up with knew about, but never received much national attention. As such, it was a relatively unknown missing person case when I recorded my first podcast episode on it. Though the girls were teenagers, they were not the attractive, white, blonde teens that received most of the media's attention. Heather was slightly overweight for her age, with lots of bushy, curly hair. The popular girls at her school picked on her, calling her Shamu. Alicia was pretty, but still an outsider in the small town of Bertrand. She was biracial with a white Norwegian father and a Nigerian mother. Her family had recently moved to America from Bergen, Norway, and she spoke broken English. There were kids at school who jokingly referred to her as a dark elf. Both girls were 16 at the time of their disappearance. They became friends at Bertrand High, where they shared a homeroom. They played soccer and loved bands like Nirvana and the Smashing Pumpkins. They stayed up late watching John Carpenter movies and binging on popcorn and Kit Kats. They got straight A's in all their classes. They dressed up as Beetlejuice and Catwoman for Halloween one year. They were inseparable. Alicia was planning to go to Harvard Med and become a dentist when she grew up, and Heather wanted to be a wildlife photographer for National Geographic. More on that later. They weren't popular at school, but they had loving families, and they always had each other. On October 17th, 1998, Heather and Alicia biked from their homes to the Bertrand Nature Preserve, a massive park covering 80 square miles of dense forest that blanketed the low-lying mountains of the Appalachian foothills. Witnesses at the visitor center saw them arrive around noon that Saturday. They told their parents they were just going for a short hike up to Bald Head Rock, a scenic lookout about 3 miles from the parking lot where they'd chained up their bikes. Tons of people hike the trail on the weekends, and the girls were planning to be home well before nightfall. In fact, Heather and Alicia were planning to see the movie Practical Magic with Sandra Bullock and Nicole Kidman later that night at 8 p.m. But 8 p.m. came and went, and the girls' bikes remained untouched in the parking lot. No one had seen them. No one had heard from them. By then, Heather and Alicia's parents were frantic. They'd already called 911, and a couple of officers had gone out to the Bertrand Nature Preserve to search for the missing teens. All they found were the bikes, still chained up outside the nature center. Over the following weeks, a huge search party combed the mountains. Hundreds of volunteers and SAR personnel checked behind every tree, looked within every bush, and turned over every rock, searching for clues. They found nothing. Eventually the news reports stopped. The missing posters on telephone poles and outside shops started to fade, fall off, or were even pasted over with flyers advertising local bands or politicians running for upcoming elections. As sad as it was, the case would have disappeared into total obscurity were it not for a strange discovery almost 2 years later. In 2000, a local Boy Scout troop was camping in the Bertrand Preserve when one of the kids stumbled upon a rusted single-lens reflex SLR camera half buried in the dirt near their campsite. He didn't know it then, but the boy had just discovered Heather's most prized possession. She'd taken the camera with her on that fateful day in October 2 years prior. When the authorities developed the camera's film roll, they uncovered a breakdown of that day's events. The first half of the pictures are known colloquially as the day shots. These pictures were all time-stamped on October 17, 1998, likely taken over 2 or 3 hours while the girls were on their hike. The photos showed squirrels scurrying among the canopy, alien-like mushrooms growing on the moist ground, and various angles of Alicia hiking up to Bald Head Rock. There were shots of Alicia silhouetted against the afternoon sun, and others showing her disappearing into an endless forest. Heather had a good eye for composition, and she knew how to make the most of natural lighting. It's sad looking at the day shots now because you can see the raw talent of a burgeoning artist finding her voice. She would have made a great photographer had she come home that day. Another thing people noticed was the way Heather captured Alicia's beauty in the photos, the way she brought out her best friend's hazel green eyes, and accentuated her sharp facial bone structure using a juxtaposition of light and shadow. There were already speculations among their classmates that Heather had a crush on Alicia. Some even believed they were a couple, though there was no evidence the two girls had ever hooked up. Some speculated that Heather may have killed Alicia after she'd rejected Heather's advances, and then Heather killed herself. But there was no evidence of this from eyewitnesses or the photos themselves. What was clear from the day shots was that both girls had a zest for life. They were having fun and goofing off. There were even some forced perspective photos of Heather and Alicia pretending to eat a downed tree. These pictures contradicted one of the authorities' early theories regarding the girls' disappearance, that they might have taken their own lives due to depression. It was a reasonable theory, given that both girls were bullied at school and had no real friends outside of each other. But they never left a note, and neither their parents nor their classmates felt they were depressed. What really got the authorities' attention was a second set of photos on the roll. They called them the night shots. These photos were time-stamped on October 31st, 1998, a full 2 weeks after the girls were reported missing. They were taken in the middle of the night with a camera flash for 30 minutes. Creepiest of all was the subject matter. The night shots were almost entirely random images of the forest, tree limbs, bushes, rocks. There were no signs of civilization in them. Just endless darkness beyond the foliage caught in the camera flash. Many of the pictures were out of focus, showing random green and black blurs. The most famous photo was a close-up of what appeared to be the back of Heather's head. Her curly hair filled the frame. Amongst those bushy strands was a dark red streak. Blood. The photos on Heather's camera were never officially released to the public. They remained sealed in evidence until sometime in the late 2000s, possibly 08 or 09. That's when someone leaked them to a now defunct true crime forum called Missing Inc., and they eventually found their way to Reddit. Once people saw the photos online, the Bertrand hikers case took on a whole new dimension. Suddenly there were dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of posts discussing the case and providing theories behind the girls' disappearance. All of them were centered around the night shots. There was a popular theory that the girls had gone off the trail and became lost, and the night shots were a way of signaling rescuers with the camera flash. There was a massive search of the Bertrand Nature Preserve on Halloween 1998. The SAR personnel were likely close to the girls at that time. Another popular theory posited that the girls became incapacitated. Perhaps they had got lost and then fallen off the trail in the dark. Both girls were too injured to hike out. Many believed Heather had died from her fall, and Alicia used the camera to see her friend and get a bearing on where they had landed. Some armchair sleuths even believed Alicia had killed Heather, given the close-up of Heather's bloodied scalp, though there was no clear motive for such a crime. Jealousy? A verbal fight that had escalated into something physical? Perhaps Alicia pushed Heather, causing her only friend to accidentally fall to her death. Alicia, overcome with guilt and worried that she would be arrested for murder, then took her own life, but not before providing a confession in the form of random photos. I didn't believe any such theories. Hi Sam, thanks again for all your support. I'd love to see what info you have on Bertrand. An hour later, he sent this reply. Would you mind meeting up at Coffeeland on the corner of Weston and Whitsett? This caught me off guard. When I received Sam's message, I was staying at a hotel in Atlanta for a true crime convention. I was there to run a panel on missing persons cases. A quick Google search revealed that Coffeeland was not far from my hotel. Sam's reply came moments later. I know you're in town for True Crime Con. Brian? A tall, elderly man stood up from his table at the coffee shop. He was balding with silvery hair and a trimmed beard. He wore a nice sweater vest, khaki pants, and horn-rimmed glasses. The man reminded me of a college professor. Yes, I said, shaking his offered hand. It was soft and smooth like he used a lot of moisturizers. My name's Samuel, he said. Please, have a seat. Can I get you anything? We both got coffees and returned to our table. The tiny shop was busy with locals coming and going. Students and amateur screenwriters sat at the nearby tables, their heads buried in their laptops. I must say, I really loved your take on the Bertrand hiker's mystery, Sam said. It's the only one that I think is close to the truth. Thanks, I said. My podcast presented a different take from all the others that covered Heather and Alicia's disappearance. I concluded that someone had kidnapped and likely murdered the girls, and the night shots were taken by this suspect. But the evidence I presented was not in the night shots themselves. Rather, it was in the day shots, the ones most people just glossed over. A good friend of mine is a professional photographer. I had asked her to examine the leaked photos, hoping she might shed some light, both figuratively and literally, on the night shots. I wanted her to brighten the pictures without losing too much information and reveal something, or someone, lurking in the darkness just beyond the camera flash. She did just that, but all it revealed was more empty forest. There wasn't anything more to see, she said. The night shots have been poured over hundreds of times online anyway. My friend paused for a moment. But I did take a second look at the daytime photos, and there was something strange on 205. Photo 205, named because of its timestamp of 2:05 p.m., was a shot of Alicia and Heather smiling for the camera as they stopped at a lookout point on the way to Bald Head Rock. The camera was likely placed on a rock so it could capture both girls. They appeared happy and carefree in the sunny proto-selfie. The picture captured just how much wilderness was in the Bertrand Nature Preserve. You can see a massive forest stretching for miles and miles behind them. Take a look at the bottom far right, my friend said. I've lightened the shadows in the background. I stared at the location, but all I found were trees. What am I supposed to see? It's right there, between those two trunks. She pointed to a black dot in the far corner. It looked like an oddly shaped stump. What is that? It's a person, she said. My friend showed me another copy of the photo, this one even brighter. The extra exposure had washed out the girls and the foreground completely, but now I could clearly see the human shape standing in the trees below them watching. The figure was out of focus, so we couldn't make out any details, but it appeared to be a man wearing all black. Oh my God, I gasped. We sent the enhanced photos to the authorities, who thanked us for the new evidence. It was the first break they'd had in the case in over a decade. The discovery made local headlines. Heather and Alicia's families even sent us thank you cards. But ultimately, it didn't lead to much. Without any bodies, there was no evidence the girls were kidnapped, and the lurking figure in photo 205 was too grainy to identify. All the forensic analysts could conclude was the suspect's gender, male, and a rough estimate of his height, 6'3". Still, the discovery made my podcast go viral. It was a nice prize after spending months researching the case. So you think my theory is the closest, huh? I asked Sam. That someone kidnapped and likely murdered them. Sam sipped his coffee. It was getting late and the shop was starting to clear out. More than that, I think I can prove it. My eyebrows raised. This better not be another conspiracy theory. I'd run across plenty of weirdos in my true crime career. People who believe that missing persons are abducted by aliens or murdered by Bigfoot. Their stories always started semi-sane, but the more they spoke, the stranger things got until you found yourself listening to how one of the 9/11 hijackers was an interdimensional being who traveled from an alternate Earth to stop the lizard people's invasion of Washington. What proof? I asked. Sam sat back in his chair and let out a deep breath. My brother passed away a month ago, he began. He was a handful. 2 failed marriages, no kids, no friends. Never got along with anyone in the family except me. He was a drunk and a compulsive gambler. Screwed over most everyone in his life. My brother was a hoarder too. Spent most of his life roaming the country, working odd jobs in construction, and living out of a beat-up RV. When he died, I was stuck with the unenviable task of clearing out all the junk he'd accumulated in his 65 years on this earth. The stench when I opened that RV made my eyes water. There was so much rotting garbage, mountains of crap. I found 3 rat corpses. 3. I don't know how my brother had stuffed everything into such a small space. Sam set his drink down. Anyway, I'm throwing out boxes of his stuff when I come across these old photos, and there's one on top that immediately caught my eye. You know what it was? I shook my head. Sam reached into his pocket and pulled out a glossy printed photo, the kind you would pick up from a CVS or Walgreens back in the day. It was semi-wrinkled and smudged with grease. As soon as I saw the image, I choked on my Mexican latte. The photo showed Heather and Alicia, and not just any photo. It was a picture taken on the same day they disappeared, on the same trail up to Bald Head Rock. But this was a new photo, not part of the day shots that I'd pored over so many times. In the picture, Heather had her SLR camera slung over her shoulder. As soon as I saw that, I knew the photo wasn't from her camera. Who took this? Sam grinned. My brother. Are there others? He nodded, but I can't show you here. Why? Sam sat back in his chair, studying me with pensive eyes. I needed assurance from you first. You want money, don't you? I'd had armchair investigators ask for payment in exchange for evidence or interviews in the past. I always turned them down. It just felt icky, distasteful. Why would I ask for that? Sam looked hurt by my question. I'd given you thousands of dollars. Sorry, I've had bad experiences, I said, hoping I hadn't ruined the deal. I meant no offense, and I'm very, very grateful for all your donations. I really am. You don't do this for the money, do you? Sam asked. No, of course not, I said. Even though at that moment, I was reminded of how often I'd hoped I could turn this side hustle into a full-time gig. Running a podcast was a lot of work and money, especially one that involves such heavy research, not to mention all the logistics involved with interviewing witnesses and loved ones. I want to bring closure, I said. I'd always felt that the only thing worse than losing a loved one in a violent crime was having that person go missing instead. At least a murder gave you a definite answer. A missing person was like a never-ending haunting, a spirit taunting you with the possibility, however faint, of a miraculous return. You want the truth? Sam said. Don't we all? Sam finished his coffee, then got up to throw it away. I live not far from here, he said. Sam's house was a modest one-story ranch-style bungalow. I immediately noticed an old RV in the driveway as I parked out front. I stared at the rundown vehicle as I walked toward the home's entrance. I'm looking to sell that thing once I've finished cleaning it out. Sam was waiting on the front porch to let me in. As soon as I did, I noticed that Sam had brought much of his brother's RV hoard inside. I had to squeeze past stacks of crumpled magazines and cardboard boxes of random junk in the living room. Sorry about all this, Sam said. Once I discovered the photos, I decided I needed to do a more thorough investigation of my brother's belongings before throwing them all out. It's fine, I said. The house was dark and musty. A heaviness lingered in the air. It felt like walking underwater. Sam led me to a kitchen table, the one pristine spot in the house. There he pulled out a dusty photo album. It was big and black with a leather exterior. I found the rest of his photos in here. The album creaked as he opened it. Inside were pictures of roadside attractions, long stretches of highway, national parks, and random people. It looked like the photo journal of a relentless traveler. There were pictures of temperate rainforests in the Pacific Northwest, desert canyons, big cities, rest stops, and lots of forests. Sam stopped as he reached a section with photos of the Appalachian Mountains. This is where it begins. The first page showed pictures of the Bertrand Nature Center and parking lot. I leaned in. There were the girls' bikes tied up outside. Flip Creek. Pictures of the main hiking trail, trees, mountain vistas. Flip Creek. There was the photo of Heather and Alicia, the same one Sam had shown me at Coffeeland. Alongside it were other photos of the girls, some of them smiling for the camera, others where they struck semi-serious poses like they were fashion models. They appeared to be having a great time. I don't understand, I said, staring. He took all of these? Apparently he'd struck up a friendship with the girls, Sam said. The old man was about to turn the page when he stopped. I instinctively reached out to turn it myself, but Sam kept the pages closed. Sorry, I need one more assurance from you before I continue. What's that? I stepped back, suddenly aware of how close I'd gotten to the old man. What I'm about to show you is very sensitive. It could do irreparable damage to my family if it ever got out, Sam said, staring into my eyes. I'd never noticed how dark his eyes were. They were a deep brown, almost black, in the low light of his house. I need you to promise me you'll keep this a secret. You cannot tell anyone, not the cops, not even the victims' families. No one. What? A million little alarm bells rang out in my head. There's something wrong here. Very wrong. I'm sorry. I kept backing away from the old man. I need to... and accidentally stumbled into a tower of magazines, falling onto the dusty floor. Sam shot up from the table. How can he move that fast? Within seconds, the old man was looming over me, offering his hand to help me up. His spindly fingers danced in the air like spider legs. I crawled away from him, but immediately bumped into the wall. Sam had me trapped in a corner. He grinned, flashing long yellow teeth. You want to know the truth, don't you, Brian? The mystery nags at your soul. You've been so good to me, filling this world with intriguing and tasty mysteries. I wanted to give you a little treat in return. He kept his hand out. I still didn't take it. Instead, my hand shot to my iPhone. "Do you really want to call the police?" Sam asked. "I don't think your parents at 2165 Sycamore Park Circle would much appreciate that." "How did you—" "I know all about you, Brian," the old man said. "I know the apartment where you live. I know the last girl you dated. I know how late you stay up editing your podcast every Thursday." "You don't have a brother, do you?" I slowly got to my feet, iPhone still in my hand, finger hovering over the emergency call button. "I don't want to hurt you," Sam said. "I brought you here as a friend. Besides, you're not even my taste." "I'm not your friend," I said, but my voice was low and weak, barely above a whisper. I wanted to shout, to scream. I wanted to deck the old man with a sucker punch, but all I could do was stand there, stiff as a corpse. "I won't." "You won't what?" "I won't tell anyone," I said, putting the iPhone back in my pocket. "I swear." "Very good, Brian. Very good." Sam offered for me to take a seat at his kitchen table, but I stood right where I was, with a clear shot to the front door in case he tried anything. "Fine. You can remain there." Sam grabbed the photo album and held it up for me to see its contents. He turned the pages. At first, I thought someone had scrawled over the photos with a red marker, but then I realized the crimson was part of the photos. Each shot a different angle of the girls lying in a dark forest. They'd been ripped to shreds, limbs torn off, intestines splayed across the dirt. It was like a pack of wolves had killed them. I hunched over, fighting the urge to vomit. "They didn't see me coming," Sam said calmly. "But they heard me, out there in the dark, trying to capture my true form on film. I didn't like that." "What are you?" I stepped back closer to the exit. "They say fear spoils the meat," Sam said, closing his album of horrors. "But when you season it like I do, it only gets tastier with time, so long as no one knows what happened. I feed on the mystery as much as I feed on the flesh." "Why them? Why Heather and Alicia?" Sam shrugged. "They happened to cross my path." I felt something wet in my hands. I had balled my fingers into fists so tightly that my nails dug into my palms. Adrenaline coursed through my veins. "You're sick, you know that? You're a sick, perverted old man." Charnel Sam laughed in response. He kept laughing and laughing, as if I'd just told him the funniest joke in the universe. His mouth grew wider with each guffaw, eventually becoming so wide it revealed row upon row of teeth within his dark maw. Each row moved independently, like a separate mouth. Sam's laughter turned into an ear-splitting chorus, so loud and discordant it took me a moment to realize what it was. Cries of agony from countless victims, Heather and Alicia included. I sprinted for the front door, accidentally knocking over a tower of boxes on my way out. Each box contained bones, femurs, ribs, clavicles, skulls, all of them human. I called the cops as soon as I was back in my car, speeding away from Sam's house of horrors. How could I not? That creature had to be stopped. The police descended upon the location within the hour. By then, Sam, his RV, and photo album were gone, but the house was still full of hoarded junk and plenty of bones. According to the FBI team that interviewed me, investigators found the remains of 40 victims inside. They wouldn't tell me who, but all were from missing person cases. When they brought me in for questioning, I told the agents everything I've just told you. They responded by handing me a massive NDA. For some reason, the authorities are keeping a lid on all information regarding Sam, his house, and his connections with any missing persons cases, including Heather and Alicia. They've even scrubbed the internet and forced me to remove all traces of my podcast, Eidolon. I kept asking them why, But the agents never gave me a reason, just some vague BS like it could jeopardize our investigation. There's a supposedly top secret nationwide manhunt for my biggest fan. Charnel Sam is still out there somewhere, roaming the highways looking for his next meal. I've been forced into hiding too. Witness protection. The FBI says Sam will never find me or my family here, but I don't believe them. I broke Sam's promise. He'll never let me forget that. But I won't rest until the truth is revealed. Charnel Sam feeds on mystery as much as he feeds on flesh. That's why I've posted this story. I needed to warn the world since the police never will. Because Sam's most likely victim is someone who has never heard of him. Don't let that someone be you. I've been staring at this blank page for hours. I don't know why I feel compelled to write it all down. It's not like anyone will believe me. Hell, I wouldn't believe me. Trauma-induced delusions. Survivor's guilt. That's what they'll call it. Whatever cute little label they slap on this madness, it doesn't matter. I know what I saw, and I know it wasn't just in my head. I worked aboard the Coldwater Marlin for 5 seasons. 5 miserable winters hauling nets in the North Atlantic. A place so cold it chews through layers of gear like it's nothing. You don't work on a boat like the Marlin because you want to. You work there because you've got nowhere else to go. We were a rough lot, guys with bad habits, bad luck, or both. Drunks, debtors, and drifters. Hal Foster, the captain, once said that the Marlin didn't run on diesel, it ran on desperation. He wasn't wrong. We even earned the reputation as the Foster kids. Ask around and they'd tell you why. They'd say, ain't no other daddy wants 'em. They weren't wrong, but none of us cared about all that much. We had a job, and the captain treated us all right. That being said, the ship itself was an old beast, rusted at the seams, groaning like an arthritic old man. With every swell, inside it was worse. The walls were streaked with salt and grease, and the air smelled like rotting fish and diesel fumes. Everything felt damp, like the ocean had already started claiming her. Looking back, maybe it had. We'd push further north than usual on that trip, chasing rumors of a dense shoal that would make the cold and misery worth it. Hal was restless this go-round. He spent his time chain-smoking in his cabin and muttering over the charts. Something about this run felt off, but we ignored it. You should never ignore it. The nights heading up there were the worst. Out in the open sea, the darkness comes alive. The sea whispers and howls, and the cold seems to rub up against you, searching for cracks to slip through. And sometimes, if you stare out at the dark water too long, you start seeing shapes, things that move too fast to be fish. I always told myself it was just exhaustion. You end up telling yourself a lot of things out there. But all that was before we found her. It was just another haul at first. The winches screamed as the nets came up, the load heavier than expected. The guys were already cracking jokes about a big payday. Then Carlos froze. What the hell is that? I didn't see it at first. Just a writhing mass of fish scales and seaweed. But then something shifted and I saw her. Pale color, too smooth, no shimmer. Human skin. She was small, no older than 8. Her body tangled in the net. Her lips were sewn shut with rusted fishing wire and iron fishing hooks. The flesh was swollen and raw. It wasn't the work of a surgeon. It was crude, violent, and old. And yet, she was alive. Her chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. Her hair clung to her face, matted with seaweed. But her eyes were the worst. Wide open, staring, but seeing nothing. The same look as the mountain of fish pressed against her. "Pull her out," Hal barked over the intercom, but his voice cracked, a sound I'd never heard from him before. Carlos and Jake hesitated, then reached into the net, their hands slick with fish slime. They laid her softly on the deck like she might shatter, but she didn't move. "What do we do?" Jake's voice shook. He looked to Hal, but Hal was just standing in the wheelhouse, staring through the glass. Carlos didn't wait for an answer. "We can't leave her like this," he said, pulling out his knife. I wanted to stop him. I wanted to shout at him to stop and think that whatever was going on here wasn't possible, but instead I just stood there and watched as he began cutting the wire. The girl didn't flinch, didn't make a sound. When the last piece came free, her lips parted, blood trickling down her chin. Then she opened her mouth. It wasn't a scream, it wasn't a word. It was a drone, low and humming, a noise that seemed to crawl into your ears and settle inside your skull. It wasn't loud, but it filled the air, vibrating in your bones, thrumming in your chest. Carlos stumbled back, clutching his ears. "What is—" he started to say, but he didn't finish. He turned and walked straight to the edge of the dock. I didn't understand what was happening. None of us did, not until Carlos climbed over the railing and jumped. God help me, I didn't try to save him. None of us did. The splash stole the silence. Then the girl sat up, her lips moving, the note growing louder. She crossed her legs and tilted her head like she was singing a lullaby for her classroom. I can still hear it sometimes. The song, I mean. It wasn't just a note, it was something profound, something that scratched its way into your brain and dug its claws in. The memories are coming back like a flood now, overwhelming me, choking me with details and visions. I can't write this fast enough. I wish we just tossed her back. Sorry, this is hard to write. I'll keep going. So Carlos was the first to go, but he wasn't the last. After he jumped, we just stood there dumbstruck, staring at the dark water where he disappeared. It was Will who broke the silence, running to the edge, shouting, "Carlos!" His voice was raw. He bolted to the railing, leaning so far over I thought he'd fall too. "Carlos, get back to the surface. We'll toss a line." He shouted over the railing, scanning the waves, but there was nothing. No sign of him, no thrashing. Nothing but the endless churn of the sea. The girl didn't move. She just sat there on the deck, dripping wet, her head tilted slightly to one side like she was listening to something in her ear. Her lips were moving, but that song, God, that song, it wasn't just in the air, it was in us, oscillating our teeth, buzzing behind our eyes. "Shut her up," Hal's voice cracked over the intercom. He was still in the wheelhouse watching everything, but not coming down. "Get her to stop." Jake was the one who went for her. Big, gruff Jake, who never flinched at anything, stomped right up to the girl. "All right, that's enough," he bellowed. He grabbed her by the shoulders, shaking her like she was a misbehaving kid. "Hey, shut it. Stop." She didn't even look at him. Her eyes were blank, on focus, like she wasn't really there. The sound kept coming, growing louder, sharper, like it was burrowing into our skulls. Jake's grip loosened and he stumbled back, clutching his head. "Make it stop," he muttered, his voice cracking. "Make it stop, make it stop." And then he turned, slamming his head into the steel wall of the cabin. Once, twice, 3 times. The wet, sickening crunch of bone and flesh made me want to gag, but I couldn't look away. Blood smeared the wall in streaks, but Jake didn't stop until he collapsed to the deck, his face unrecognizable, his head concaved. That's when the real panic set in for us. Will bolted for the door to the crew quarters, screaming something incoherent. Danny, the youngest of us, just stood there shaking, tears streaming down his face. "What's happening?" He kept whispering like a prayer, like someone was going to answer him. The hum pulsed, vibrating through the deck beneath my feet. I felt drawn to the edge, my legs carrying me closer, unbidden, shaking like rubber. I don't know how I stayed upright. Maybe it was shock, or maybe some part of me was already detached, already giving up. I don't know. All I know is that the sound was getting louder, more insistent, more melodic. I looked over the railing and that's when I saw them. At first I thought it was debris, bits of nets and waste bobbing in the waves, but then I saw their faces. Children's heads, pale, bloated, their eyes wide and glassy. Dozens of them, floating just beneath the surface, their mouths moving in time with the girl's song, opening and closing, slowly layering their voices in perfect synchronization. A whole choir. My legs finally gave out. I collapsed to the deck, clawing at the steel beneath me to keep from sliding forward, to keep me from falling into the water with them. "Don't listen to the kids," I screamed, though my voice barely sounded like mine. Will came running back, holding his head like he was trying to keep it from splitting open. "They're in my head," he sobbed, his voice high and broken. "I can hear them. I can hear..." He grabbed a knife from the workstation and plunged it into his own throat. The blood sprayed in a hot, sticky arc, and he collapsed beside Jake's body, twitching as the life drained out of him. The girl finally stood up. Her movements were jerky, unnatural, almost thrashing. Her lips parted wider and the sound shifted, becoming something more rhythmic, more euphoric. It hurt to hear it, but it was beautiful. Danny went next. He just walked past me, silent, tears still streaming down his face. He slipped over Will's blood, leaving a long smear of a red boot print. He straightened himself and continued. He just kept walking. He kept walking until he climbed right over the railing and stepped off. No hesitation, no struggle, just gone. And the ocean he fell into wasn't quiet anymore. It erupted. The following wave sounded like a spasm of exploding glass, like 1,000 fish breaking the surface all at once. Danny didn't make a sound, but the ocean was roaring. I don't remember deciding to move, but I found myself running into the cabin. I knew I needed to find something to cover my ears. The corridors of the ship felt tighter than usual, closing in on me as the chorus echoed off the steel walls. I grabbed anything I could find. Rags, duct tape, anything to stuff in my ears. I kept winding the tape over my head until my ears bled. Then I stepped back out onto the deck to see if there was anyone I could help. I wish I didn't. Off near the bow of the ship, I saw 2 deckhands engaging with each other. Matt and Reynolds. Matt was standing over Ray with a wrench in his hand. He swung down. The crack was a sickeningly wet thud, almost hollow. I watched as Matt raised the wrench again. Another twist of his wrist brought the metal tool down again and again and again, until the wrench was hitting more deck than bone. I couldn't hear him, but it looked like Matt was screaming. I turned and darted back towards the stern. I found Stanley and Greg huddled together near the entrance of the wheelhouse. They'd stuffed their ears too, and we shared a look that didn't need words. I pointed to the door, asking them to open it. They shook their heads. Stanley motioned towards the observation window above us. It was painted red. Flickers of sparks and flames illuminated what should have been the control system. I looked back at the men. Greg made a pistol gesture with his hand, pointed at his temple, then mimicked firing a shot. Captain Foster was gone. I slumped down next to the both of them. The song was piercing right through our ear protection. We knew we'd crack soon. We were just picking straws to see who it'd end up being first. And it turns out, it'd be Stanley. He ripped the tape out of his ears, screaming that he couldn't take it anymore, and ran for the edge. Greg tried to stop him, but he couldn't run as fast. I didn't even try. I couldn't. I watched Greg jump in after him. Instead of joining them, I ended up walking across the deck towards the cold storage containers. There were 20 men aboard the Marlin when we started our trip. By now, a good handful had jumped, but the ones still aboard, the ones that I could see, were little more than rapidly freezing masses of meat plastered against cold steel. Matt was also missing from the last place I saw him. Ray was too, though chunks of Ray were stuck to the railing, thrown overboard like a feed bucket. As I walked past the open door to the lower levels, I could vaguely hear the girl's melody echo out through my ear protection. I wondered if Matt went down there with her, or if there were half a dozen other Matts brutalizing each other in those cramped corridors. I didn't want to envision what was going on down there, but I did. I ended up barricading myself in one of the shipping containers. I don't know how long I stayed there for. Days, weeks. Time lost all meaning. All I could hear was the faint hum of her song, always there, pleading for me to step out. And then all at once, it stopped. When they finally found me, I didn't recognize them at first. I was slumped in the corner of the shipping container, curled into myself like a frightened animal. The banging on the steel door was distant, muffled. For a moment, I thought it was her. That she'd come back. That the song would start again and drag me down like it had the others. But it wasn't her. When the door creaked open, I blinked against the sudden light. Voices filtered in. Real voices. Not the broken voices of dead deckhands that I had grown accustomed to. They were always accusing me. Always asking why I didn't jump ship with them. Asking why the life of one drag was worth more than the life of the next drag. And the hardest one, asking me why she let me go. A man in a bright orange winter rain suit knelt in front of me, his gloved hand on my shoulder. "You're safe now," he said, his tone gentle. But I saw the way he looked at me, the way his eyes flicked over my fluid-stained clothes, my emaciated figure and my sunken face. He wasn't sure what he'd found. They pulled me out of the container and onto their vessel, the Arctic dawn. The air was frigid, the sky overcast, the sea a vast gray expanse stretching toward the horizon. I watched as the Coldwater Marlin was drifting silently behind us, its once busy deck now lifeless and slick with frozen blood. I didn't say much at first. I couldn't. My throat was raw, my mind a fractured mess. They gave me blankets, water, and something hot to drink. I remember the captain, a middle-aged man with a beaten-down face and kind eyes, asking me questions. What happened? Where was my crew? How long had I been out there? I couldn't answer. How do you explain something like this? How do you tell someone that the ocean swallowed 20 men because of a little girl with sewn-shut lips? Eventually they stopped asking. Maybe they thought I was in shock. Maybe they just didn't want to know. As the hours passed, I started piecing together fragments of what they told me. The Marlin had been spotted drifting aimlessly, its radio silent, its engines dead. The crew of the Arctic Dawn boarded her, expecting to find mechanical trouble or a stranded crew. Instead, they found nothing. Just blood on the deck, some personal belongings scattered in the cabins, and me, locked in that container. No bodies, no signs of struggle beyond the blood. Eventually I tried to tell them about her. The girl, the song, the heads in the water, but the words sounded ridiculous even to me. The captain listened quietly, his expression unreadable, but I could see the doubt creeping into his eyes. That night, after I said my piece, I sat alone in the galley. I overheard the other crewmates talking. They didn't know I could hear them. "Maybe he snapped," one of them said. "Killed the others and lost it." "Doesn't explain the blood," another replied. "There's too much of it for just one man. No way one man can cause that type of mess." "Could have been pirates," someone else suggested. But the words hung in the air, hollow. Pirates don't leave a ship untouched, and if someone goes missing, there'd be a ransom already in the works. When the captain walked in, the conversation stopped. He looked at me and nodded, but his expression said everything. I tried to sleep that night, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces. Carlos stepping off the deck, Jake's skull caving in against the wall, Danny's vacant stare as he walked into the sea, and her, always her, that blank expression, those dark, unblinking eyes. In the early hours of the morning I heard it again, faint, almost imperceptible, like a hum carried on the wind. I bolted upright, my heart hammering in my chest. I ran to the deck, desperate to convince myself it wasn't real. The ocean was still, eerily calm under the gray light of dawn. But I saw something. A ripple, a flicker of movement just beneath the surface. And then they appeared. The heads. Not dozens this time, but hundreds, bobbing silently in the water, their mouths opening and closing in perfect rhythm. I backed away, trembling, but I couldn't look away. Their eyes locked onto mine, and I felt it again. That pull, that irresistible urge to join them. I screamed for the others, but by the time they came, the water was empty. Just waves and wind and the endless gray horizon. They think I'm crazy. Maybe I am. But I know what I saw. And I know it's not over. Whenever my mom spoke of my grandfather, she just told me he was sick and cared more about alcohol than he did his family. The irony that she only told me this when she herself had had a few too many wasn't lost on me. It made me wonder, was being messed up some kind of inheritance, carefully preserved and passed down? Whatever it was, fate, inheritance, just plain dumb genetics. It didn't spare my aunt either. I got the gist of her death. Cirrhosis. A night comforting herself in the only way she probably knew. A car accident, and then, well. My cousin Liam moved in with us shortly afterwards. He was small and pale with a lazy eye. Mom wasn't too excited about getting another mouth to feed, which I thought was rich. I'd been living off of school breakfasts and lunches for the past year, none of which she had paid for. I wasn't too excited either, because Mom made it clear that he'd be sharing my bedroom with me. What teenage girl is excited to have a 4-year-old roommate? It wasn't that there was much of an alternative, though. Our trailer was tiny, and putting him in the living room would mean that my mother would have to give up her late-night TV. He'd only brought a small backpack, with a change of clothes that looked like they hadn't fit him for months. I knew my mom wasn't going to do anything for him, so I took him to the Goodwill down the street and spent the money I'd scraped up working part-time at the nursing home. I tried to think how many bedpans I'd emptied for the money as I held up tiny shirts to his torso. He stared at me. Well, either at me or the mannequin behind me. I couldn't tell which eye was the dominant eye yet. The fitting rooms had been closed permanently, so I just eyed the bottoms as well as I could and checked. The cashier cooed over him, and when I explained about the clothes maybe not fitting, whispered that I could run home and try them. If they don't fit, come back before I'm off, and I'll give you a refund. Plastic bags jostling my legs, I hustled us back home, practically dragging him behind me. His hand was limp in my grip, and I kept glancing over my shoulder to make sure he was okay. It was then that I realized I hadn't heard him talk yet. I don't have a ton of experience with little kids. Nursing home and high school are pretty much the only places I go besides home. But that's not normal, right? My mom was in the living room, talking loudly on the phone, so I let him into our room, and emptied the bags. Here, get changed. He watched me blankly and I sighed, leaning over to help. I froze when I saw his arms. Look, I'm not going to get explicit. Last thing I want is some creep reading this who gets off on the thought of kids getting hurt. All I'm going to say is that someone had been hurting this kid. I dropped his arms, staring at him. He looked back blankly, and I stormed out to yell at my mom. Logically, I knew that this wasn't her fault. It was her sister's, either for doing it or allowing it. But she was dead, and my mom was the closest person I could blame. We devolved into a screaming competition. I called her sister an a-hole, and we went from there, with her telling me that I didn't know what had haunted her sister in life. By the time I went back to the room, I knew for sure the girl was off her shift, and it didn't really matter if the clothes fit or not. He'd grow into them, because I was going to make sure he got fed. Nothing was going to hurt this kid ever again. I bandaged him up, fed him fish sticks for dinner, and got him into bed before I had to take off for work. I don't know much about parenting, but if our relatives are what doom us, then I wasn't going to be another mark against him. My mother was passed out on the couch when I got home, but I didn't worry about waking her. Gabriel and his horn couldn't wake my mother after she was through drinking on a bad day. Rolling my eyes, I headed for the bathroom, pausing when I noticed the door to my room was open. I closed it as I passed. No need to wake the kiddo. I wondered if my mom had checked in on him, and then almost laughed. Yeah, right. I started noticing that stuff was off the next couple of days. Doors were open, things in my room, even things that he couldn't reach, had been moved. One night I came in to find my blinds had been torn down, and the window opened. There was no way he was strong enough to do that, so I just assumed my mother had, in a drunken fit, tried to air out the house. That's what I told myself anyways. But I didn't really believe it. My mother had never decided to try and do anything useful while drunk, even if it failed. It wasn't until the weekend when I had time to help the kid take a bath that I realized that the wounds weren't healing. In fact, he had more. The tub kept filling and almost overflowed before I caught myself and turned it off. What was going on here? My mother was awful, sure, but she'd never hurt a kid. At least not knowingly. I'd been around the kid all other hours of the day, except for when I had to work. My next thought was that he was doing this to himself, to cope with losing his mom, and what I'm sure was a bad childhood. Still, it didn't make sense. He didn't have access to knives, and I don't think he could cut up his own back. I toweled him off, rebandaged him, and called in sick to work. It hurt, saying goodbye to hours I'd fought so hard for, but this was more important. He still didn't talk, but I tried, squatting down to beat his level, asking him who was hurting him. He didn't answer, still staring off behind me, and I gave up. Helping him brush his teeth, I put him to bed, but left the bedroom door open. Mom was off somewhere, probably trying to get drunk, get a man, or both. So for once the TV was off. I made myself comfortable in the living room and started painting my nails. I'd only done my index finger when I heard the door to my bedroom creak shut. I stood up, putting the brush back in the bottle, and went to check. The room was still and dark, but for the lights from the gas station across the road. It took me a moment to see Liam, but he was huddled under the blankets in the little bed I'd made up for him, just as I'd left him. Maybe a draft had blown the door shut. I wedged it open with the dirty uniform and went back to the table. I'd barely done another 2 fingers when I heard the door close again. This time I was faster, rushing to the door and flinging it open. But again, nothing. I noticed then that Liam was shaking underneath the blankets. I knew he couldn't be the one closing the door. There was no way he'd closed the door and made it back under the covers that fast. Liam? I squatted down next to him. Hey, what's going on? He didn't answer, and I pulled back the blankets with my polish-free hand. I gave up the idea of keeping my manicure intact, though, as he started screaming and thrashing. Whoa, Liam, it's me.
He stopped screaming when he finally saw that it was me, and stared, eyes wide, chest heaving. He looked so little in his two big Paw Patrol pajamas that my heart thumped painfully. Who would hurt him? "Hey, buddy, what's going on?" I sat down, crisscrossing my legs. He shifted his gaze to behind me, and I glanced back surreptitiously. Nothing but the yellow light from the living room. Wait, there was something else. There, right behind me, something was pressing into the carpet. I couldn't see what it was, only the indents in the shag where something was standing. I stopped breathing and mechanically turned around. "Let's get you a late-night snack, okay?" He was hard for me to pick up, but I managed it, not even looking back as I carried him out of the room. I closed the door right behind me, trying to seem normal about it, like I hadn't noticed what was in there. I held him close as I hurried to the kitchen, and I could feel his little heart beating through his chest. What the heck was that, and why was it hurting him? I made silly faces as I mixed powdered milk with water, but my mind was racing. I remembered Mom had talked about her father and the deal with the devil that killed him more than once, but I'd always figured she was just talking about how he'd drunk himself to an early grave. Maybe not, though. Maybe she'd meant something much more literal. I had no way of contacting her, and she was probably too drunk to tell a coherent story wherever she was anyways. What else should I do? Call a priest? That idea seemed best, so I gave it a go while he drank his milk obediently. But when I called the local church, all I got was an answering machine. I thought about the police, but dismissed it. When they saw how beat up he was, he'd be taken away for sure, and I knew that whatever that thing was, it would follow him. What else? What else? A quick Google search revealed that there were as many ways to deal with a monster as there were horror stories. But how could I tell which one worked, if any did? Salt seemed to be a common defense, so I wrenched open the drawer next to the sink. We didn't have salt really, but I always grabbed lots of packets when my old folks didn't want them. It saved money, even if it was just a little bit. I started ripping open yellow salt packets, dumping salt on the ground, scattering it on the counter around Liam. He watched me, milk mustache drying. I smiled tensely. "I'm just trying something, buddy." There was a creak, and despite myself, I turned to watch my bedroom door swing open. It looked perfectly natural, and my stomach twisted. How many times had I come home, two doors open that I knew I had left closed? How many times had this poor baby been hurt, hiding under the blankets, alone with no one but my intoxicated mother to protect him? I turned back to see that his gaze was fixed firmly on something I couldn't see, mouth slightly open. He was starting to shiver, and I picked him up again, handing him a salt packet for luck. I watched the salt carefully. The white grain stood out starkly in comparison to the dark linoleum, and I could see clearly that there was something brushing up against the edges, but not moving forward. I breathed a sigh of relief, and they were brushed aside as whatever it was began moving through them. This may sound dumb, but I wasn't too sure what else to do. None of the doors in the trailer were strong enough to keep out a toddler, so I couldn't barricade ourselves in. Holding Liam close, I fled the house. Mom had taken the car, so we couldn't drive off, or even lock ourselves in it. The gas station was closed except for the pumps, as was everything else. I ran as fast as I dared in my flip-flops, not daring to look away from my feet. "If you see that thing, you have to tell me," I told Liam, voice shaky as I gasped for air. He tightened his arms around my neck, head swiveling against my shoulder. "I see a lot of them." It was the first time he'd spoken, and I almost dropped him. How many?" He didn't answer, just held me tighter. I didn't know where to go. I just kept moving, hoping that I could stay ahead, that we wouldn't get surrounded. Face pressed against me, Liam began making a soft, keening sound. He thought we were doomed. Ahead there were lights, and I realized that I hadn't been paying any attention to where we were going. I'd just run, and now we were approaching the Target parking lot. In the light, though, I could see movement in the dirt on the sidewalk ahead of me. I paused and looked back. There was something there, too. I didn't think I could climb the chainmail fence my other side, meaning that what I had feared had happened. I clutched Liam close and squatted down, like I could fully shield him. I wasn't a good mother figure. I didn't read with Liam. I had no idea if he knew his colors. And he'd just spoken to me for the first time. I didn't know how to take care of anyone besides myself, and I couldn't keep him safe. I realized something as I held him. These creatures had never bothered my mother, and my aunt had died from a car crash. In all likelihood, if I left Liam, they'd leave me alone too. They only wanted him. Back when I was younger, I'd had a neighbor who'd looked out for me when Mom was too hammered to know or care where her daughter was. The neighbor had told me stories about how, in the Bible, when parents sinned, it was held against the kids. But then Jesus had set people straight, because kids weren't supposed to be blamed for their parents' sins. It's just that they were often a casualty. Like me and my bad luck inheritance. Like Liam with his inherited demons. Neither of us had ever done anything wrong, and yet we were still doomed by the narrative. But I wasn't going to sacrifice him. I'm so sorry I can't protect you. I whispered against the back of his head, but he didn't answer. I don't know if you believe in miracles or not. Frankly, I don't care. What happened next was a miracle, and nothing else. A white light washed the area, and I saw them then. The creatures that had followed us. My stomach twisted when I saw how many of them there were. Grotesquely twisted carcasses, skeletons impossibly elongated, faces little more than gaping maws. There was a sound like a bell, and the light faded, but I could still see them. The light hadn't completely faded, haloing the ground next to my feet, and I looked down, seeing for the first time a tire iron wedged in between the concrete and fence. I put Liam down, untangling his arms, and hoisted the iron. It felt warm against my palm, and I turned, keeping Liam behind me. The creatures weren't fast. They didn't need to be. Already our circle was shrinking, but I am not my mother, and I am not my family. I would rather die fighting than hide. I have to patch myself up several times a week. Whatever they are, they don't come out during the day. I've moved my shifts, so I only work in the daylight on weekends. Not that summer is over. Liam is growing and talking more. His cuts are all finally healed up, but he has some pretty gnarly scars. Mom has a new boyfriend, but as long as she keeps paying the bills, I frankly don't care what she does. I sleep with a baseball bat by my bed, and bells on my door and windows. I guess I'm writing this to say, even if you feel doomed, you are not. You might have to fight like hell, but hey, we are not our parents. Their deals with the devil, their problem, not ours. Good luck. And if you see footprints behind you, run. Finally, followed by a huge sigh of relief, is what I thought after setting down the cardboard box marked "My Stuff" in the living room of my new home. The relief wasn't that of any physical exhaustion, since the house came furnished. It was more of a mental relief. Aside from the tedious search on the market for one that fit my paid peanuts salary, I could finally say I was out of that apartment. Now, you might think that's a little ungrateful and exaggerated, especially for those that have lived or are living in a crappy apartment. But trust me when I say mine was exactly that. Crappy. From the garbage heating system to the repulsive growing mold on every corner. I'm surprised it was even legally allowed to be up for rent, but then again, the neighborhood wasn't all that great either. It was the kind that required every window to be barred and every street to be surveillanced past sundown. If I'm being brutally honest, though, all those things were just little gripes that fed the real reason I couldn't live there anymore. To me, the place felt like a cage, and not because of the barred windows or my need to install 4 locks on my door, but because it was a reminder that I would be stuck there forever, with no indication of a better future. So I began to save up some money. I laid off on the useless spendings, got a better job. 2 jobs, actually. As much as I hated the place, I will say it was a hell of a motivator. Anyway, during the time I was saving up to move out, I came across a tear-off flyer as I was taking my morning jog down to the park. It read, "Home for sale," in bolded red letters and displayed printed images of the home. 2 stories, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. It was 10 miles north of where I lived in a city you can say lacked the kind of excitement you'd find down here. Below there was the price, $140,000. This immediately got me questioning the liability of the flyer, but then as if placed to diminish all doubt, all the flyer's labels except one blew loosely in the wind. I stared at it for a while and finally ripped the whole thing from the wooden pool and stuffed it into my pocket. 1 phone call later, and a lot of paperwork, and here I was, in my own home and finally free from that cage. It wasn't all that much, but given I've been living in the saddest excuse for an apartment for over 6 years, it was basically a mansion. An old mansion, that is. It was as though the whole thing was pulled right from the Victorian era. There was a matching intricate floral design on the walls, carpets, and curtains throughout the entire house. In almost every room, a large chandelier hung conspicuously around the furniture that was as chaotic as Van Gogh's painting palette. Mismatched colors and cramped knickknacks on every drawer. It was odd to me that someone would sell a house that looked like someone was still living in it. I mean, I've seen furnished homes for sale, but the furniture was usually new, neat, and appealing to look at. This, on the other hand, gave me a sense of claustrophobia and made my eyes go fuzzy just staring at it. I found it even more bizarre that the house was up at such a low price and there was no other potential buyers, despite the torn labels from the flyer. Still, I bought it. I mean, who wouldn't? The real estate agent representing the seller was a slender, older woman, and judging by what she was wearing, time was having a pretty rough time passing through her too. She wore a black pointed gown, tightly secured with a corset that did more harm than good. Thick strands of greasy hair escaped from under her dark bonnet, like snakes slithering out of their nest. She was friendly, though. There was almost this forced nature to her. Her voice was too soft for her appearance. Her unusual bony fingers twitched anxiously on her hands like they had a mind of their own, and her smile sat on her face like a heavy dumbbell pulling down on her aged skin. Hard to imagine living here with all this furniture. I can't believe someone would just leave it like this. I guess some people are just eager to move out. Yeah, tell me about it. You know, this place can use someone young like you. Someone with enough energy to lighten up the place. Just think of it as a game. I stood there still in a state of pride and a little excitement. I scanned the living room, then the dining room, and finally the kitchen. It felt odd not having them less than 3 feet from each other, or the fact that the space between the 3 wasn't a bedroom. I found myself touring around again, occasionally examining some of the antique items on the shelves like I was in some yard sale. There's no way I'm keeping all of this up. I moved to the kitchen, staggering over my feet since the mattress my mind was so used to avoiding was no longer there. I opened the kitchen cabinets. The previous owner had even left his silverware. They looked new, but I'd rather not take any chances. I turned to head toward the staircase leading to the bedrooms upstairs when I heard a door slowly sway open. The creaking of the hinges doubled in the silence. It was a door to a small, empty closet in the living room. I walked over. I swear this was never here. I guess I never noticed it. I closed the door and made my way upstairs toward the bedroom. Naturally, I chose the most spacious of the 3 bedrooms for myself. It also happened to be the one with the least amount of furniture. There was a mahogany wardrobe on one end and a king-sized canopied bed on the other. Next to it, a nightstand accompanied with a night lamp that looked as though spiders had spun its lampshade. There was also a large built-in closet with sliding doors. I slid the closet door open, half expecting it to be full of clothes and shoes, but it was empty. I guess the owner wasn't gracious enough to leave his clothes behind. Just then, I felt a cold breeze brush up against my neck. I turned, pawing at my neck. No windows. I can't remember what drew me to look up at the ceiling, but I did. I noticed a faint outline of an attic door above me. The ceiling was high enough so that no normal person could reach it without some sort of elevation, and there was no drawstring to pull down a ladder either. The saleswoman never mentioned the attic. Maybe it belonged to an attic long ago sealed, but why leave the entrance marked? Or maybe there was an attic and it was too filled with junk even older than what was down here. Either way, it was mine now, and I was curious enough to investigate. I stared at it for a while because I remember the aching sting on my neck when I looked down for any possible way to get to it. Then the phone call came. The loud ringing of a phone shot through the house. I instinctively looked down at my phone, but there was no incoming call. With that, my ears honed in on the sound. It was coming from the living area downstairs. As I made my way down, I noticed it had that old high-pitched bell sound of an old dial phone. The black dial phone was hiding among the many relics in the living room. I let it ring longer, hesitant to answer, somehow knowing the call would be unsettling. Finally, I answered. Hello? A stretched static sound made me pull away from the phone. I called out again. No answer, just static. Then a faint, raspy, and distant voice fighting through the static spoke. Don't look around. What? Who is this? Don't look around. Don't play the game. Just ignore it. Before I could give another bewildered response, the static fired a hard ring that stung my ears to their very core. I dropped the phone in pain, shutting my eyes so tight I saw white. In a fit of rage, I pulled the whole thing right from where it laid and threw it against the wall. It shattered. What was that? A prank call? Yes, and maybe the thing was too old to handle another call. Yeah, that's it. That night, after pulling off the sheets that came with the bed and replacing them with my own, I laid there in the dark, chasing sleep. You would think that on my first night in my new home, I would sleep soundlessly with a sense of fulfillment and satisfaction, but that wasn't the case. Every time I'd close my eyes, I'd hear the floor creaking downstairs. After a while, the creaking would be accompanied by subtle kicks on the wall like someone was running or playing downstairs. The whole thing brought back those frustrating memories of my upstairs neighbors living their lives in the night like some nocturnal animals. My restless mind echoed the warnings given to me through the phone. Just ignore it. Don't play the game. Was this some sick joke someone was playing on me? What a coincidence that as soon as I got a call telling me to ignore it, the whole floor suddenly became some rickety bridge blowing in the wind. Maybe I was overthinking it. The phone call just had me on high alert. I read somewhere before that the creaking you hear in the night is just your home's wooden structure contracting and expanding. I kept telling myself that and zoned out moments later. The next morning I quickly noticed that the weak flooring was permanent. Everywhere I stepped, the floor would creak, despite it not ever doing that the day before, or the times I was in the house with the saleswoman. I also began to notice other changes, or gripes I hadn't noticed before. The silverware, along with most of the antique items, appeared older, splotches of grime and millions of tiny imperfections all over them. I even found some of the items rusting. The furniture appeared worn out and dirty, which gave me a slight feeling of disgust. The house itself had this smoky aroma that reminded me of old books. I would be lying if I didn't say regret crept into my mind then, or that my eagerness might have blinded my senses, but it was still far better than my apartment. In the days following, I focused on cleaning out the house of all those antique items. After the phone call, the items started to rub me the wrong way. They felt alive, like each one had permanently open eyes. Despite my efforts to take them down and shove them into one of the bedrooms, I'd still get the sense that someone was watching me. I would turn, but again there would be nothing there. Once I was so certain something was watching me from behind that I turned a corner pretending I didn't know. Then, like a little kid anxiously waiting to scare someone, I peeked my head out from the corner, waiting to see what or who would come out. Of course, nothing ever came out. I looked so stupid, and I knew that I was becoming paranoid. The kicking and creaking continued every night, which was something I was failing to get used to. I bought some earplugs and even tried to sleep in different bedrooms to see if that would change anything. It didn't. One night I got into bed, inserted my earplugs, and began some breathing exercises I learned on YouTube to help with sleep. My mind was fading into nothing when this loud bang pierced through my earplugs. I quickly sat up from my bed. A second bang came from my door like a vicious knock, followed by running footsteps on the other side. I now faintly remember the childlike laughter that came after, though at the time everything happened so fast. I stormed out of my bed and violently swung the door open. I looked down the hall. "You think this is funny, huh?" I screamed from my door. There was no response. I searched the entire house that night. Again, nothing like always. I wasn't scared and never once thought the house was haunted. That isn't real, right? I was mad. Mad that I could barely sleep at night. Mad that I couldn't relax in my own home, and worst of all, mad that my old apartment was sounding more and more livable each day. Then one day, as I was cleaning out the other bedroom pretending everything was normal, a sudden salty, penetrating smell wafted into my nose. I covered my nose with the back of my hand, but the pungent smell lingered. It was moist and reminded me of all sorts of dead animals. It didn't take me long to pinpoint its origin. Under the bedside table was a clear, almost silvery puddle of a thick, vicious liquid. The sight of it, along with the growing smell, made me gag. Under it were large, savage scratch marks scarring into the old wooden floor. As I stared, completely confused at what I was looking at, I noticed more of the scratch marks around the bed. Then it hit me. The house was infested. It wasn't the natural movements of the wooden floor that was causing the insufferable creaking and banging. It was the scurrying of the rats or some other rodents. My paranoia was probably just a response to the answer I knew deep down. To think that those things had me question if the house was haunted would have been laughable, if it weren't for the sudden anger and hatred that boiled in me. I was determined to find them and kill them. I searched the house slowly and cautiously. Knowing that they could be anywhere made my skin crawl in disgust. As I looked behind and around the furniture of the living room, I heard one nearby, behind me. I turned. My eyes immediately locked onto the couch. It's behind the pillow. I slowly made my way to it, choosing a lamp as my weapon. In an instant, I moved the pillow out of the way and was about to strike, but nothing was there. Suddenly, something knocked some of the knickknacks off one of the drawers behind me and scurried out of the living room in a flash. I didn't see it, but I heard its nails scraping against the floor. After a while of searching and after I cooled down, I knew I wasn't going to catch it, and even if I did, Judging by the amount of scratch marks, it wasn't just one. I needed traps. I went to the store to purchase some and set them all around the house. Now all I had to do was wait. That night, I slept the most I ever had since I moved. There was barely any, if not no, creaking and banging. In the morning, I sprinted downstairs like a child would the morning of Christmas Day, only I wasn't excited about big, colorful presents. I was excited to see my nightmare end, trapped and lifeless. The smile on my face disappeared as quickly as it took me to get downstairs. The traps were empty. No presents, no rest, and definitely no peace. But I had a plan. I was hoping to save some money, but there was no way in hell I was going to live here one more day like this. I started upstairs to my bedroom. I grabbed my phone, pulled up a phone number for an exterminator, and headed for the door, when from the corner of my eye, I saw a mass on the ground near my bed. It was on all fours and was about the size of a medium-sized dog. The rest of its details blurred, though I remember the smell. It was a decaying, suffocating aroma. I twisted my head to see it, but before I could, it scuttled under my bed. This is it. I blindly reached for whatever, a broom, as I steadily moved closer. Slowly I crouched, keeping my distance. I heard it retreating deeper, hiding behind some boxes. The smell was unbearable. There was a faint whimper, or my mind refusing to believe it, a concealed laughter. I heard its nails gripping tighter against the floor. With the broom's handle, I suddenly swiped one of the boxes to the side. In a blur, it moved out from under the bed. The sliding door of the closet closed shut before I even had time to look up. The speed of it was unnerving. I suddenly felt a cold shiver run down my spine. I moved closer, the storm of a million questions in my mind winning over the instinctual feeling to run. I was unable to feel anything but my heart pounding out of my chest. I tightened my grip on the broom as I felt my hands go clammy. I reached for the sliding door, my hand hovering over it, trembling. Right when I slid the door open, the thing came bursting out. I fell to the ground. It ran out of my room, giggling like a child. It was a child or the size of one. I stared, frozen in shock. It was human-like, only its skin was pale, almost translucent. I saw its bleached purple veins webbing throughout its unnatural and misshapen body. It was layered over the disgusting, shimmering coat of that silvery liquid. The smell was like a physical mist that burned my eyes. On the ground, it left a trail of its viscous liquid. I followed it downstairs and into the living room. There it was, in a corner with its crooked back to me. It had its hands raised to its face, and in a childlike voice it began to count down from 10. With every number, its voice became more distorted, and its back began to stretch and grow as if something was trying to escape from under its pale skin. My stomach nodded as it doubled in size. Time slowed down for me. Don't play the game. Just ignore it. Just think of it as a game. This whole time, this thing was living in my house, or I was living in his, and that feeling that someone was watching me, it was this creature playing some game of hide-and-seek with me. And it was finally my turn to hide. Before it could finish its sick, distorted countdown, I found what courage I had left and ran blindly upstairs. I heard it finish and give a gargling, deep laugh. I felt its footsteps reverberating, crashing down on the ground. I made it to my room and shut the door, barricading it with the wardrobe. I backed away to a corner and sobbed. I've been in my room all day and can still hear it searching downstairs. Sometimes it comes up, its large shadow passing through under the gap of the door. I freeze completely still as it passes by, giving out its heavy breathing and weak, almost painful laughs. Just the thought of it finding me is beyond terrifying. I mean, The title is rather self-explanatory. I'm at Vienna International Airport and everything is frozen in time. All the morning passengers are here, all of them unmoving like fleshy, warm statues. Looking outside through the window, I see a flight departing, suspended in the air. Next to me, a woman is dropping her handbag and all the contents are frozen in the air, unaffected by gravity's pull. Suppose I can elaborate a bit, as at the moment, it appears that I have all the time in the world. I was on a business trip to Vienna and I had to travel back to Paris CDG Airport with an early morning flight. On the way towards the terminal, staring out of the cab, I saw the airport lights in the dim, cloudy dawn sky. Some of the departing planes were awfully slow, almost like they were not moving at all. I was thinking of pointing this out to the cabbie, but I chalked it up to tiredness. See, after conference, networking cocktails and 6 a.m. flights are not a great combination. So I was far from being in a chatty mood. Either way, the guy dropped me off and I decided to have a quick ciggy before checking in. While smoking, I wondered about airports. How fascinating they are. A while ago, during my university years, I had a part-time bartender job at one, and I always found them eerie. They were liminal spaces, areas of the in-between, people just heading there to pass through it, sort of a border world. Of course, seeing airports like that could have been Stockholm Syndrome because by this student job as well. After all, I needed some sense of wonder to tolerate 5 a.m. shifts. And now, many years later, here I am at 5 a.m. again, but this time as one of the travelers, a wandering soul lost in the liminal landscape. I let out a brief laugh. The hangover left me way too philosophical. Yet the eerie feeling I had turned out to be more of a premonition, rather than a hungover inner monologue ramble. Things took a sharp turn for the weird at security. Well, there were quite a few people, many gates were open, so the crowd moved fast. I got directed towards a freshly opened security station. It was surrounded by tired-looking officers, one instructing me to put my laptops and fluid containers on separate trays, the other two standing behind the metal detector gates, waving me through, and a third one, slightly peculiar. He was sitting behind the monitor of the X-ray machine you put your bags through, wearing huge aviators, basically covering half his face. Well, I figured you gotta make a fashion statement somehow, even if you were obligated to wear a uniform. Anyways, I was about to walk through the gate, the metal detector, the symbolic border between the mundane and the liminal, but the very moment I stepped through it, complete silence engulfed everything. I reflectively touched my ear, thinking my earbuds somehow turned on noise canceling, when I realized that they were in the tray, which slowly rolled down on the pickup area, and that was the only thing moving. Everything else stopped, like someone hitting a pause button. Odd, I figured. I slowly walked through the gate, but nothing changed. Everything around me stood still. The security guy's hand frozen in a bored wave. A man putting his belt back on unmoving next to me. A family in the other queue, stuck in mid-argument. Their small kid, her face trapped in a mid-crying expression, but no sound leaving her mouth. Wish I could do this to kids once the plane took off. Nevertheless, temporal anomalies be damned. I did not want to miss my plane, so I grabbed my stuff from the tray. Yet, as I was putting my laptop back into my bag, I saw one thing. Or, well, the absence of it. The security guy with the sunglasses was nowhere to be found. The whole thing did not look like something that respects airport security standards. Walking towards my gate, D24, in the dead silence was certainly an experience. I moved through crowds in suspended animation. Or sure as hell I hope it was that. It would be rather awkward to be at an airport full of dead people. Still, it had a certain beauty. Upon arriving to D24, an unusual sight welcomed me. The monitors showed the boarding was open, and indeed, the doors were ajar, but the flight destination, instead of Paris CDG, just looked like a jumbled mess of characters. Now, while my app said that it was the correct gate, I did not want to end up at the wrong location, so I decided on not boarding for now, waiting it out instead, hoping that a staff member or an announcement will clear up the confusion soon. I was a bit hungry and a nearby bar seemed, albeit overpriced, but fairly attractive. I walked over, crisscrossing the statue-like crowds. I grabbed a sandwich and, as the staff was unavailable on account of being frozen in time, I decided to walk behind the till to the coffee machine and help myself to some drinks. For a moment, I entertained the thought of making myself a nice flat white, but I figured that if time restarts and I'm standing in a restricted area steaming milk, I may get some angry looks. So I opted for an espresso instead. The tiny cup was halfway through when I heard something familiar. The breaking news announcement of Euronews on a nearby TV screen. Well, something, apart from me, was unaffected by this time stuff. So I quickly grabbed my coffee and my sandwich. The total was $12.30, so I put a tenner on the counter and figured they can keep the change. Indeed, at the back of the bar there was a TV broadcasting the morning news, oblivious to the frozen world around it. Chief investigator of the crash at Air France flight. I have hidden the flight ID just in case. At Vienna airport this morning states that at this time, the exact cause of the accident cannot be determined, while the number of confirmed casualties just passed 80. The search for survivors continues. According to witness testimonies, the aircraft overran the runway during takeoff and crashed into the industrial area of Schwadorf, a settlement near the airport. Authorities have asked the public to forward any information, including recordings of the events of the authorities. Rather macabre watching these news at an airport. I was thinking, when it hit me like a freight train, or like a crashing plane. The flight they were talking about was the one I was supposed to board. Now, while I was trying to cut down on my smoking, the news warranted another cigarette. The airport has a nice smoking area looking at the runway, where a flight was taking off, except it wasn't, as it was just floating silently, in a surreal manner, some sight for a smoke. Yet, as I was clicking my lighter, I noticed something weird. Well, something that should have not been weird, but in this specific scenario, it was rather unusual. A few airport technician-looking guys in high-visibility vests, cargo pants, and despite the cloudy early morning, dark aviator sunglasses were walking around. You know, actually walking, while the world around them was dead still. I'm back now at the restaurant, typing this down on my laptop. Now, I know that my demeanor may feel like I'm not taking the situation seriously enough, but trust me, this is my defense mechanism when I am positively crapping myself, which is pretty much the case now. I mean, I'm not stupid. I saw the news of my crashed plane and I can connect the dots. I'm wondering if this is limbo, death, or some otherworldly stuff. But the call of nature is disrupting my spiral into anxiety. After the coffee and the ciggy, I'm not only about to crap myself figuratively, but also literally. So I will try to hunt down a bathroom in this hellscape of an airport. I'll check back in a bit to see if anyone's around and update y'all. Cheerio. Update 1. So I went to answer the call of nature. Luckily, 1 out of the 4 stalls was open at least. I was also not jealous of the poor guys whom eternity found in the middle of dropping a log. So I was doing my business when I noticed feet. First I could see shadows under the stall door through the gap, then 2 pairs of work shoes. 2 people walking around in the bathroom. Now, I was about to call out, but something held me back. On top of how awkward it is to make a mid-crap conversation, Soon I realized what set my alarms off. I saw the feet, but I did not hear them. They were walking in complete silence until they started talking. I mean, I reckon they were talking, but I couldn't understand anything. Saying their words were garbled is an understatement. It sounded like a recording of an already foreign language being played backwards, while distorted via a radio. So I clenched my buttocks and remained silent until they left. I was not against the idea of trying to communicate with whatever these lads were, but the situation was not exactly ideal, so I decided to delay. Instead of immediately heading back towards the bar near my gates where I've left my luggage and my laptop, I wandered around a little bit, as my plane was not about to leave. Upon inspecting the motionless terminal, I found some of the guys I've seen earlier on the runway, and in the toilet. Contrasting how everything was halted around them, they stood out being busybodies, but they were always behind locked doors, on different floors, or otherwise inaccessible territories, in parts you would normally not notice while wandering around an airport. Forgive me for sounding like a broken record with the whole liminal spaces thing, but this was another aspect of that. When you're at a place like this, a place of transition, there are so many little nooks and crannies you just look straight through. At an airport, you move through with purpose. Everyone moves with purpose. So these areas escape your attention. Now it was the contrary. In an uncanny way, no one moved with purpose. No one moved, period, except in these hidden places, which highlighted them, making me feel like I'm seeing things I shouldn't be seeing. However, this was not reciprocated. See, I was not particularly hiding, yet none of the employees appeared to react to me in any way. It looked like I had two options: reenact the movie Terminal, except in this ghost airport, or just take my chances to get noticed. So I chose the latter. I started waving at them through the windows of locked doors and shouting at them from floors below, yet they all remained unfazed. Pretty rude, honestly. Or at least this was the case until I got back to my spot. Then things escalated. Returning to the bar where I left my laptop and bags, I could see 3 of these airport security-looking guys carefully circling my luggage, discussing it in their garbled radio language. However, upon my arrival, unlike the other airport staff, this trio noticed me, and they made it painfully obvious that they did. As soon as I approached, they turned towards me in perfect unison. Now, I know that leaving your bags unattended like that is a big no-no at airports, and in a normal situation, I wouldn't have done so, but it's rather clear that this was far from what could be considered normal. I hoped that they would agree, so I apologetically explained to them that I was just heading to the pisser for a little bit. My excuse did not seem to convince them. The 2 dudes on the side kept staring at me through their oversized sunglasses unmoving, while the third one began to move towards me with seemingly malicious intent. I attempted to defuse the situation diplomatically, but seeing how he steadily moved his hand towards a black taser-looking device holstered on his belt, I concluded that my charisma will not save me today, so I resorted to the next best alternative: violence. I know full well that my following reaction was not a rational, well-adjusted one. Assaulting airport staff is a fine way to get banned from flying for life, after all. But let me explain. See, in my late teenage years, I had a short stint as an employee at a shoddy nightclub. Some of my experiences there irreversibly altered my fight or flight instinct into punch first, ask questions later. And believe me, I felt threatened enough to have my reflexes take over. So anyways, I swung at the guy. Admittedly, I am not in my best shape, definitely not after last night, so I was somewhat surprised seeing him collapse like a sack of flour. As soon as my knuckles connected to his face, sending his earpiece, cap, and glasses flying. I was somewhat even more surprised seeing the other two guards immediately dematerialize in that same moment, just gone in a blink. I began to suspect that these guys were not your usual bored, underpaid, caffeine-addicted airport staff, but something more sinister. Soon enough, my suspicion became certainty. The less lucky one of these entities I whacked laid in front of me face down, to see the damage I may have caused and to check his pulse just in case. I grabbed his shoulders and turned him on his back, so he faced towards me. Now, remember I said these guys look like normal airport employees? Well, there was a little bit of a difference. The guy had like a million eyes. The face, previously covered by the dark tinted lenses, which now lay shattered on the floor, stared at me with countless pupils. Small ones, big ones, just dotted all over the sockets. In a way that should not be possible. Not entirely unlike a spider, but way more crowded. In fact, there were simply too many of them. They should have not fit the space normally only occupied by two eyes. Yet there they were. Kind of like a Mandelbrot fractal. They appeared to be almost infinite, and frankly, fairly hypnotic. But I had to snap out of it. For the lack of anything better to do, I figured I'd sit down and type this update. I have mixed feelings about the situation. On the one hand, I'm somewhat relieved that I didn't ruin the day of some poor guy at the airport. And parallelly, didn't ruin my chances of me flying ever again. But in the meantime, I am a tad perplexed by what could be the consequences for KOing a timeless, slightly eldritch entity. On top of that, I can't really get those eyes out of my mind. And not in a romantic way. See, no pun intended. I honestly don't know for how long I was staring into them. But once I was out of it, I feel like I remembered something. I'm not too sure what yet, but I think I'll take another smoke break to try and figure it out. Here's hoping that my pal won't go anywhere. I'll get back to y'all soon. Update 2. Midway through my ciggy, I realized that the unconscious guy may have a way of entering those little hidden areas I was ranting about beforehand. Since, at this point, I was fairly certain that the areas accessible for passengers won't hold any answers. I figured I could borrow a keycard. Spare me for the moral lesson of looting from a, hopefully only, unconscious entity. Of course, these security gates also require a password in addition to the keycard, but since apart from the trio messing with my luggage, no one acknowledged my existence. It was not particularly difficult to follow one of these mysterious walkers towards an off-limits area and peek at the 4 digits password over their shoulders. The key code was, I kid you not, 4444. Airport security. Yeah, right. I opened the security door and entered a bland, white, blindingly lit hallway, leaving the passenger area with its soothing colors, kitschy decorations, and fake plants, and entering a blindingly lit, barren security hallway. Surprisingly, it didn't give me as much of a whiplash as I expected it would. Of course, this corridor had none of the artificially welcoming atmosphere of the Traveler's Lounge, but it still felt like that the two areas were related. I can already hear your snarky comments saying, yes, both are parts of the airport, but it's not that. It felt like the empty corridor represented the reality of this place, and outside of it, all the bits and bobs that made it feel welcoming were just there to ease people in a sense of familiarity instead of liminality. But here, behind the thick blue doors, that poorly fitting facade was dropped. No siren, no comfy feelings. Colorful advertisements and €2 massage chairs here for you. The corridor screamed, through the humming of the bright white neon lights, that you are a stranger, and you shouldn't be here. Too bad I got used to people screaming at me not to do things, then doing them anyways. And corridors, I guess? Kinda ruined that metaphor here. So I marched on, peering into barren office rooms, some of them containing some oblivious airport entities, their real self hidden behind the sunglasses. After a bit of wandering, I noticed an area labeled Monitoring Room, and on a whim, I entered. The label didn't lie. There sure were some monitors in there, like a lot of monitors. Way too many to fit in a room of this size. They weirdly reminded me of the jumbled mess of eyes the entity I knocked out. And as this thought entered my mind, and I remembered staring into those eyes, the smorgasbord of screens suddenly started to make sense, and I began to see security camera footage steadily shifting through all of them. At first glance, they appeared to be normal security feeds, but upon closer inspection, I noticed some increasingly unusual things at each one I looked at. The first anomaly I noticed was an image depicting the frozen scenery at the departure gates, including the big board listing all the flights, flight numbers, and destinations. Except, apparently the 1300 Aeroflot flight was scheduled to leave to Pulkovo Airport, Leningrad. On another screen, the corridor with unmoving people had big billboards behind them, one of them proudly displaying a vaguely familiar elderly guy who, despite looking 80 plus, still had a fabulous pompadour haircut, and next to it, with big bold letters, The King 90, Elvis Live, at Ernst Happel Station, Vienna, 08 January. On another, every sign and advertisement was written in German. I am in Austria, but still, the complete lack of English was unusual in an international airport. In addition, airport security was wearing uncomfortably sharp uniforms with red armbands. As I looked closer in a corner of the screen, I had to do a double take, as a sizable portrait of a certain mustached failed artist and piece of crap was there on full display. Each screen I looked at showed this airport, but subtly, or less subtly, altered. I was witnessing different realities from a nondescript nerve center. After a certain point, I found the security footage of the little bar I left my stuff at earlier, and I noticed something pretty upsetting. And bear in mind, after seeing a long dead dictator's painting on a wall, the bar to upset me was placed pretty high. See, you remember that TV I've seen on the news report of the plane crash of my flight? I could kind of make out through the security screens that it was still broadcasting about the accident. The issue is, the broadcast was the same in all the alternate realities, no matter how many screens I was looking at. Apparently there are some worlds where Elvis survives or where the USSR still stands, but it appears that my plane overshoots the runway and blows up in each one. Bit of a bummer, really. I snapped out of staring at the screen thanks to the beep of a walkie-talkie laid down on the table next to the screens. The sound was followed by a conversation of the airport staff in their unusual, incomprehensible language, until it stopped being incomprehensible. As I started to focus on it, just like on the creature's eyes and later on the screens, I simply realized that I understood what they were saying. I'll try my best to translate. Execution error for Cornerstone event number 4778. Due to passenger/victim manifest incomplete. Please advise. Handler A out. Handler A, we may have an update on your situation. Analytics department confirmed the identity of the interloper. Missing Cornerstone event. Manifest perimeters are at value match with interloper. Handle B out. You know those moments when two people are crap-talking a third one, not knowing that said third person is within clear earshot of them? The whole stitch began to feel like that. I mean, I'm pretty sure that you figured out who they refer to as interloper the same time as I did. Yours truly. Now, as the subject of the conversation, I felt that I was warranted to contribute, so I pressed the button on the radio and, to the best of my ability, I tried to speak in their language and mimic their expert talking style. Handler A, Handler B, this is Interloper reporting. Please advise on how to assist in resolving issue with Cornerstone event parameters. Interloper out. A bit of inconvenient silence followed. I had a feeling that someone was about to be fired. Roger that, Interloper. Please stand by until HQ is instructed. More silence. This is Handler A to HQ. Initiate Cornerstone event rollback. Active Handler Group, this is HQ. Please confirm rollback request. I was wondering if they were aware that I can hear all of this. Handler A confirming. Handler B confirming. Active Handler Group, this is HQ. Air France flight. Of course, my flight. Return to Cornerstone event launch position. Awaiting parameter correction. Finally, they got back to me. Interloper, this is Handler B. Do you copy? Interloper, come in. Loud and clear, Handler B. I responded, fighting back the urge to wish him good luck in his future job hunt. Interloper, please return to the initial spatial coordinates of departure from your host timeline. Once your spatial coordinates are approved, your temporal coordinates will be reset. Please continue routine to ensure Cornerstone event success. Right, great. So I go back to the security gate with this whole mess started. My good friend Handler B resets time. I board my flight, then crash and die, and ensure that the Cornerstone event is done in my timeline. Wouldn't that be a right, heroic sacrifice? Roger that, Interloper will comply. I said, hell no, I thought. I'm typing this note just in front of that ominous security gate that froze the moment I passed it. If I understand the handler correctly, the moment I pass it again, time will restart. One way to find out. See you on the other side. Final update. Okay, so it worked. I'm typing away from the same bar I was sitting at, except now everything is in motion again. All is well now. Well, almost all. As soon as I passed through the gate and everything suddenly reanimated, I began to feel a bit nauseous. Was it the fact that after hours spent in a frozen, soundless, and timeless world, suddenly the hustle and bustle of reality returned? Or was it because I was still hungover as hell? And it didn't occur to me that I could have nicked a paracetamol while time stood still. Don't know. But I needed to shake it off and get the closest thing I could to a cold shower, a thorough face wash. Except as I was drying my mug, staring at myself in the bathroom mirror, the eyes of my mirror image started to blur and proliferate. Who knows, maybe soon I will have to invest in some large dark aviators. I can also catch some unusual changes in the corners of my eyes. Is that a poster of Elvis over there? That sign that was just in English just a moment ago, is it now written in Cyrillic? But apart from these minor inconveniences, most things seem to be okay. So am I about to board a crashing plane? No. As you may have figured that I am not great in following instructions. As soon as I was back, I set my VPN up and sent a couple of anonymous emails to airport security, to the police, to Air France, letting them know that something is off with that flight. I see that it is delayed now, and they are replacing the craft, citing technical issues. If I'm actually losing it, and imagine the whole thing, I probably ruined the day of my fellow travelers. But if not, then I just helped those poor guys to live to see another day. But about the implications of me doing that, well... So, all sunshine and rainbows, right? I ought to pat myself on the back. I messed around with beings beyond time and prevented a major accident. Yeah, normally I would, but there are some subtle things going on that overshadow my urge to celebrate. See, the eerie sunglasses wearing part of the crew is still around, and they definitely look a bit more agitated than before. And while I couldn't really catch all their conversations, here and there I hear some jumbled radio fragments I still understand. They mention a certain cornerstone correction protocol and enhanced intensity events in close proximity. Now, what does that mean in practice? Hell if I know. And I know I am being pretty vague here. It sounds like stuff is about to go down. Well, either way, they're calling my flight. Suppose it is time for me to leave this godforsaken airport.